everyone. I'm Barkha Dutt, and you're with The Mojo Story, our independent digital platform that brings you some of the most interesting newsmakers from across the world on the issues that really matter to people. Today, something that is one of the most politicized and communalized conversations in the country: Muslims and the population numbers. In a new book called The Population Myths, the former Chief Election Commissioner of India, S.Y. Qureshi, is busting many of these myths, many of the assumptions, many of the falsehoods, and calling out both fear-mongering and hate-mongering, using not ideology or sentimentalism, but hard data. He's unpacked this data to bust what he calls the myths around population explosion and Muslims. Now, it has often been a common parlance argument to suggest that Muslims produce many more children, and one day in India, if you listen to the fearmongers, Muslims will overtake Hindus in this country. S.Y. Qureshi is telling you many things in the book, including the fact that this is absolutely false. Let's bring Mr. Qureshi, Dr. Qureshi, on the program today. Old friend, known him for many, many years, and glad to see him in his new avatar as an author and almost as a social scientist, because the book, as I said, uses not sentimentalism or his identity as a Muslim or any of these things, but uses actually data. Now, Dr. Qureshi, welcome. And that is, of course, your training as someone who's looked at data all your life in your, not just as a bureaucrat, but as former Chief Election Commissioner of India. But let's bring up some of the most common numbers that are cited in this fear-mongering argument, and I'll ask you to make sense of them for us. Now, in 1951, Hindus were 84.1% of the population and Muslims were 9.8% of the population, right? But if you compare this to the 2011 census, and this, the 2011 census tells you that as of now, in 1.38 billion people, Hindus make up 79% and Muslims make up 14.2%. Now, these are the numbers that are often cited to claim by those on the hard right that one day Muslims will overtake Hindus in this country. But you are, of course, while looking at the gaps between Hindus and Muslims, telling us that that is in fact never going to happen. Dr. Qureshi, what made you write this book?
Actually, this book started accidentally in 1995 when the then country director of UNFPA, he was a Canadian, Tavia Abrams, came to see me. And he suggested that I write a strategy paper for family planning among the Muslims, because Muslims were not adopting family planning in a big way. So he wanted me to write a strategy paper. I was quite taken aback because neither was I an Islamic scholar, nor had I ever worked in family planning department till then. Of course, as deputy commissioner or as SDM, we had some targets of sterilization to fulfill. That was our only exposure. So I tried to wriggle out of it because although it was a very attractive offer, against my 5,000 per month salary, he was offering me 1.5 lakh rupees for 1 month. But I said, all right, if you insist, I'll do it for 1 rupee. But we'll go through all the procedures, and this is what we did. But when I did this study, it took me longer than 1 month, it took me 5 months, but it opened my eyes also. Like everybody else, I also had thought that Islam is against family planning, for instance. And
you had thought that as a Muslim, you had also thought that your own religion is maybe against family planning. मतलब इतना stereotyping है कि आप खुद भी यही मान रहे थे.
Exactly. तो उस वक्त जब मैंने ये सब स्टडी की और मैं तो हैरान रह गया कि इस्लाम ने तो 1400 साल पहले, जब पॉपुलेशन का प्रेशर दुनिया में कहीं नहीं था, उस वक्त क्वालिटी ऑफ अपब्रिंगिंग, बच्चों की हेल्थ, माँ की हेल्थ, उनकी अपब्रिंगिंग वगैरह का जो एम्फेसिस था, that was really surprising. And that is why what I have written is Islam is actually the pioneer of the concept of family planning. And we have, in our interpretation through the years, given a totally wrong impression and followed a wrong practice.
And what was the biggest discovery while you were researching this book?
Well, basic discovery was this only. Otherwise, about the data, we all knew that the propaganda that the Muslims produce too many children. In fact, the allegations were basically that 3-4 like this, that Muslims have the highest birth rate. And as a result of that, the demographic balance has been disturbed. And it is an organized conspiracy by the Muslims to take over political power. and we produce so many children through polygamy, which every Muslim has 4 wives and 20 children or 40 children. Hum पांच हमारे 25. This kind of discourse we had been hearing from the beginning. So when I studied this, and your data also shows, at no point in time the number of Muslim children was more than one compared to a Hindu family. If a Hindu family had 4, Muslims at 5, if a Hindu at 5, Muslims at 6. That is all it was. And now it has come down to half a child. Now, obviously, it is awkward to.
So let's talk. Let's pick up this polygamy point, because it is one of the most common myths, right? And now your book actually looks at a 1974 report, which is the last known report or the available report, where you say this report showed us, this is in your book, that polygamy cuts across communities, and it isn't just particular to the Muslim community. Also, that as societies modernize and women become more equal to men, polygamy is also declining in all communities. So this is the other important point. But one of the startling things that this 1974 report found was that actually Muslims were showing one of the lowest incidences of polygamy, as unlike what is commonly assumed. But Dr. Qureshi, some might say that you are citing 1974 data. After that, polygamy was outlawed in Hindu communities. It has not been outlawed in Muslim communities, where personal law continues to prevail. And so those numbers could have changed. What did your research tell you about the practice of polygamy in Muslim communities today, in the modern age?
Yeah, number one, this is the only study ever done. So what else can I quote except the only study which was ever done? But also at the same time, it was not a freak data, because then I compared the data which was available. I had looked at the census figures from 1930 onward, 30, 40, 50, and I found exactly the same trend, that every community in India was polygamous and the Muslims were the least. Now, that is the irony, because I don't practice polygamy, but I'm willing to fight for it. लड़ने मरने को मैं तैयार हो जाऊं. Or those who are actually indulging in polygamy are making it an issue. So that is the dilemma which I have exposed through this. But let me also tell you, now these statistics apart, in India, polygamy is just not possible. Even if we want to do it, it is not possible.
Why do you say that? Why do you say that?
I'll tell you why. You must have heard of the gender ratio. In India, the gender ratio is adverse against women. A sad story in itself, because that is because of discrimination against women. They are not allowed even to be born. Now, the last census showed 940 women for 1,000 men. Currently, today, in 2020, it came down to 922. Now, for 1,000 men, there are only 922 women. So where do I get the second woman from? She does not exist. In fact, I have argued in a lighter, but statistically, in India, nobody has even one full wife. Everyone has a 0.9 wife. Where do I get the second? Now, some people argue that after all, there is 5% polygamy, which I have mentioned. So some people will marry a second. That is very good for population growth, because studies have shown that the number of children from the only wife, if it is 5, from the second wife, it comes down to 1.2. Because if I marry 2, somebody else will stay a bachelor then. So therefore,
but this is, some would say you're making a joke. The truth is that the declining sex ratio, or the skewed numbers of women, girls who are not allowed to come into this world, does not necessarily tell us how the practice of polygamy is in Muslim communities compared to other communities. We simply don't know, because we just only have the 1974 data.
No. Yeah, that is true. But then I had said that I have looked at the census data from 1930 onward. And for 3 consecutive censuses, it was the same trend which was reflected in the 1975 study. So, and secondly, I said, even if a Muslim wants to marry a second woman, there is no second woman available. As I've told you, from the gender ratio, and gender ratio, of course, across communities is maybe different. 5-10 women, more or less. So that
okay, but do you believe that it is time for the Muslim community also to reject practices like polygamy? Has that time come for the community to modernize? Because the central argument of your book is that yes, there is a higher growth rate among Muslims than among Hindus, let's say. But the reason for that is not religion. The reason for that is poverty, the lack of education. And for
Yes.
example, we have a number in your book, and we'll bring that up in the graphic, which shows, I think, that less than 53.7% Muslim women have passed sixth standard. So that means half of India's Muslim women have not even studied till class 6.
Yeah, the 4 5 allegations which I mentioned in the beginning, I start my book with the admission of the first two. One, that the birth rate of the Muslims is indeed the highest. Also, the demographic ratio has changed a bit. From 84% Hindus, they came down to 79.8, and Muslims went up from 9.8 to 14.2. But in 60 years, just 4 percentage point increase in 60 years. Now, if it was to be 40% increase, it will take 600 years. Now, to say that Hindus, Muslims are coming, but they're going to take over political power because of the numbers, it is as funny as that. In fact, I got a friend of mine, Dr. Dinesh Singh, who was the Vice Chancellor of Delhi University. He is a great mathematician. I sent him my data and I said, Dinesh ji, please, can you do an analysis? Can you make a mathematical model for me? How long will it take for the Muslims to overtake the Hindus? And he had sent me his model, which I have included in the book. He said, no question ever, not even in 600 years, forget about it, it can never happen. So therefore, I think those who have been spreading this myth should be now happy that this is not going to happen, and we should stop spreading this lie.
But I picked up those numbers that even today, there are 80 crores more Hindus than there are Muslims. But in terms of the polygamy debate, what is your own personal view on it?
Yeah, I personally feel that, as I said, that if Muslims don't actually practice polygamy, why are they fighting for it? I think let us surrender it and let us accept that polygamy should be banned across communities. Because
you would be in favor of banning it across communities and not citing personal law, which is what is cited to keep it.
Yeah, correct. I would rather that we banned it across the board. After all, many Muslim countries have banned it, and so why can't we?
Can you talk a little bit about how the disparities in socio-economic development played out in terms of decisions to have more or fewer children?
Yes, as I mentioned that, of course, the Muslim birth rate was the highest. It still is the highest, but Muslims have been catching up very fast. The acceptance of family planning by the Muslims has been at a faster rate than the Hindus, which is why the gap is narrowing, which I've shown through statistics. Now, and in about 20-30 years, there will be total parity. Both the communities will have the same birth rate. Now, why is it? Now, it is important to understand. Why is it that the Muslim birth rate was higher? Was it because they believed that Islam was against family planning? Was it because there was an organized conspiracy by the Muslim mullahs, or somebody was telling us, please produce many children and take over power? I have not come across any such evidence at all. But the birth rate was highest because of socio-economic factors. There is a chapter which shows that what are the actual factors. One is literacy. As the literacy goes up, the number of children goes down. As the income goes up, the children go down. As service delivery goes up, children go down. And there is another chapter which looks at Muslim indicators against all these socio-economic factors. They are backward in everything. They are the least educated. They are the poorest. The service delivery that doesn't happen because nobody wants to go to those ghettos, calling them mini Pakistan. So how will they improve? Therefore, but nobody is talking about their education. Nobody is talking about their income. In fact, on the contrary, they are saying that they don't do any business with them. Don't buy vegetables from them. If they become poorer, they will start producing more children. We want.
So basically, you're saying that on one hand, there is prejudice. On the other hand, there is socioeconomic backwardness. And the combination of prejudice and socioeconomic backwardness is keeping Muslims ghettoized, is keeping them from making educated choices and interventions when it comes to deciding how many children they should have.
Yeah, but then ghettoization is not entirely because of their own socio-economic factor. There are political reasons. They are being pushed back into those ghettos. Therefore, that is another problem we need to look at. I remember I'm a Delhiite for 500 years, and our colony around Jama Masjid was all a mixed population. But after every small disturbance, we found that the Hindus moved out and Muslims came back from across the other Chandni Chowk side of Jama Masjid. So this is what has been happening, which is very, very sad. Now, when I go to my locality in Matia Mahal, there are only two Hindu shops, and I make it a point before I reach my home, I go and call on them. And I salute them that they continue to feel safe and they have not moved out. They were the most popular shops anyway because they are good people.
Yeah, but your research also shows that because of this poverty and because of this educational backwardness, because of the lack of and the Sachar Commission report remains as true today as it was when it first came out so many years ago. Even the access to something simple as contraceptives, both the decision to use it and the access to it differs between Hindus and Muslims. And we'll pull up that slide in a moment on contraceptions if we can. But Dr. Qureshi, what did the data show you on this? Just the lack of access to contraception.
Yeah, in fact, the third factor which I had mentioned, service delivery, it included availability of contraceptives, access to the doctors and the paramedics, hospitals where the women could deliver. Their number is the least in the Muslim community, and the access of Muslims to these facilities is the least. So, which you've seen, for instance, the data which you're showing. This much is the contrast. Now, in spite of these disparities, where actually Muslim family planning acceptance could have been even lower, it is surprising that they have accepted birth control so willingly, so much so that 20% of the Muslims have undergone sterilization, which from all interpretations of Islam is considered un-Islamic. But they have gone out of the way to even go for sterilization. So the fact that they are picking up and catching up fast and faster than the Hindus is a happy sign, and we should encourage it. And also,
in fact, the data shows that the highest decline in fertility rates today is among Muslims. Obviously, in absolute numbers, the growth rate is higher, but the decline is also the sharpest. Both numbers are true.
Yes, correct. Also, let me also tell you in this context the concept of unmet need. Unmet need is when I want to do family planning, but services are not available, doctors are not available, therefore my need is not being met. The unmet need of the Muslims is the highest, which shows that they want to do family planning, but there is no service. Immediately, if we can go and meet their needs, their figures will shoot up like nothing.
Now, this book comes against the backdrop of a private member bill in Parliament which wants a coercive to child policy. So obviously the Hum Do Hamare Do has long been a slogan of India's family planning program, but it has never been mandated other than the years when Sanjay Gandhi wanted to bring in Nazbandi. But now you have a private member's bill in Parliament that is actually looking at this as a legislation. What is your own view on this? I won't share mine. I personally will only say that coercion usually ends up punishing women who in this country do not have the kind of sexual autonomy that they should have over their choices, reproductive autonomy. But this book coming against the backdrop of this private member's bill in Parliament, what do you make of it?
So, number one, this backdrop is absolutely accidental. My book was in the pipeline for 25 years. And it started in 1995. It just happened that a couple of years ago, there was a private member's bill. But and this bill is not anti-Muslim. It is going to affect all communities. If they want to make it compulsory, it will be across the communities. But there, the recommendation would be that any compulsion is counterproductive. And you see China had to go back on the compulsion of whatever norm, one child norm it was. And also in the Indian context, the fact that the sterilization was imposed on the communities, Muslims, Hindus, or across the board, all communities, that we have not recovered from that backlash even today. Now, no politician is willing to talk about population. I have mentioned in my book that the number of parliamentary questions asked is 0.003 or something like that. So, although it is such an important national issue, this should have been high on the national agenda. But the fact that after the emergency backlash, politicians are fighting shy of it, it has become a taboo subject. I think we need to reconsider that.
If you had to simply explain to people why India should not have a mandatory two-child policy, if you had to if you had to explain it very simply, what would you actually say?
I think India's population policy is a success story. We haven't had any compulsion, but 24 states have gone below the replacement level. Now our replacement of population will become a problem. If we can achieve whatever through persuasion, why do we need a danda? And persuasion has been working. 24 states in the country have already gone below 2.1, which is the replacement ratio. Only 2-3 states, Bihar, UP, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, the so-called Bimaru states, we have to focus on them a little more, and they are also almost there. UP has improved a lot. Bihar is now lagging behind. So let us focus on that
So
and follow the.
what would be your ethical problem? I'm pushing you here. I personally do not support a coercive two-child policy, but I know a lot of my friends do. It is one of those middle-class Indian things to believe. You know, जैसे एक ज़माने में कहते थे, हाँ थोड़ी देर military rule कर दो. In this lazy way, there was our privileged class that would question our democracy. उसी तरह के कहा जाता है, and you would have heard this quite often, कि ये एक कानून के मुताबिक 2 बच्चे होने चाहिए, no more. Would you at least agree with a policy of incentivization, if not disincentivization?
No. I think just persuasion, because actually it is a need of the people. The mothers, who have produced 3, 4, 5 children, they get tired and they want to stop, and which is where the concept of unmet need comes in. They want to do 5. If you ask them, they don't want any more children, but then there is no facility. So compulsion actually will be counterproductive, because and if I can give you an analogy from the election, there used to be a demand for compulsory voting. Now, compulsion and democracy don't go together. We have achieved highest ever turnout as a matter of policy by persuasion, through voter education. When persuasion can work, why do I go for compulsion? Compulsion is always counterproductive, particularly in such a personal matter. Now, if I can afford a third child, I'm a rich guy and I can bring them up very well, it's fine. But normally, very high majority of our population is poor. More than 2 children is not good for them, and they realize it, which is why the felt need is high for accepting family planning practices.
You also found a lack of equality in the access to neonatal care, to prenatal care for Muslim women. So poverty is really at the heart of this story. And like I said, I'll bring up the numbers again, just that, more than half of India's Muslim women have not passed grade 6. This is a number that really stayed with me, to bring home how poor the community continues to remain. What was the difference you found in the access to prenatal care, Dr. Qureshi?
Yes, now it has to be seen in 2 contexts. One, there is Muslims are the least educated, so therefore we should talk about their education. Whether it is now, at the same time, it is not a religious question. A Bihar Hindu family may have 5 children, whereas Muslim families in Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Andhra Pradesh have only 2 children.
Now, there's also a north-south divide. How do you explain that? Is it a cultural difference?
It is a culture, more than culture, partly cultural, but also socio-economic factors. There is better education there than in Bihar. So therefore, if religion was a factor, South Indian Muslims would be producing 5-7 children, because I think they are better Muslims than we North Indians. So they would have followed their Islam and produce too many children, but they don't. Now there are 22 states which have where the Muslims have lesser birth rate than the Hindus of Bihar. Now, which clearly shows that it is not a religious issue, because Bihar is backward. Even Hindus of Bihar are backward. They are poorer, and it is poverty and illiteracy and service access which determines all this. And you showed a graph about Muslim education. Muslim is 53%. Now, with less education, there is less awareness of the family planning practices. And because of poverty, they don't own a television or radio, therefore they have less access to information.
Yeah.
And when that happens, obviously the higher birth rate is the result.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about how the population conversation around Muslims is directly linked to the othering of Muslims. You know, if the one thing that is used to rationalize prejudice against Muslims, where that prejudice does exist, it is always the numbers. It is always the numbers. कि ये तो इतने बच्चे पैदा करते. You know what you said, that the हम चार हमारे 25 narrative. Do you find that narrative even among educated Indians?
Absolutely, because this has been the narrative for 50 years. When you hear a falsehood again and again and again, you start believing it. And as I said, even I believe that Islam is against family planning because I'd heard it many times, and I had heard it both from the right-wing Hindus and also Muslim ulama, which is surely a misconception, which I proved. There is an entire chapter on what Islam says about family planning. Nowhere in the Quran family planning has been prohibited, and there are only interpretations for and against, and on which basis we came to this conclusion. And I have given my own interpretation that Islam is the pioneer of the concept.
Explain that. What do you mean, the pioneer of the concept?
Pioneer in the sense that, there is a verse in the Quran which says, "Oh, young men, when you have the wherewithal, you should marry." So one poor man, whatever the people could not understand from the Quran, they went to the Prophet for explanation. So some poor guy went to the Prophet and he said that the Quran says, and when I have the wherewithal, I should marry. I don't have the wherewithal. I'm a poor man, but I have my sexual desires. What do I do? So Prophet repeated that verse and said that till you have the wherewithal, you should resort to fasting, because fasting suppresses sexual desires. So I think the first is injunction, the other is to fulfill that injunction. And there was also a third hadith when somebody went to the Prophet and he said that I have many children and I want to restrict the number of children. The only method of family planning those days was withdrawal method, azl. So he said, I want to do azl, but the Jew says that it is the minor infanticide. So Prophet said, no, that is wrong. It is not infanticide. No, it is not infanticide. What Jew said is a lie. It's a lie. So even the withdrawal method is approved by the Prophet. So together, there's a verse from the Quran and these two hadith is a complete injunction for family planning. And there are a whole lot of verses from the Quran and hadith which I have given in the book, which talk about the health of the women as a consideration for birth control. The right of children for a good upbringing, good education as a reason for birth control. My entire chapter and which is what came to me as a revelation when I started my research in 95.
Where do you find more misinformation, among the hard right or the Muslim sort of ulama orthodoxy?
Well, but they were both ill-informed, but I would say the hard right wing, for them it was a deliberate political strategy, because you mentioned the word othering. That these Muslims, they are going to overtake, and Hindus are Hindu khatre mein hai. So it was a deliberate political propaganda. Whereas on the part of the Muslim, it was a general impression, general feeling. I studied that also. I went to some Muslim home कि भाई आप family planning क्यों नहीं करते? ये हमारे मजहब है. हमने कहा किसने बताया? So there no answer. It was just a vague thought which was just in the air, and they picked it up. We went to ulama also, the imam. They also said कि हमारे इस्लाम के इसके खिलाफ है. हमने कहा बताओ कोई आयत दिखाओ, कोई हदीस दिखाओ. There's nothing. All that was खुदा के पैदा करता है तो खाने को भी देगा, इसलिए don't worry. एंड इस किस्म की जनरल बातें करके कोई ऑर्गेनाइज अटेम्प्ट कि भाई बच्चों को बहुत पैदा करो, जरूरी है अपने पॉलिटिकल पावर कैप्चर करने के लिए, ऐसा कोई एविडेंस मैंने नहीं देखी. एंड आई विल बी हैप्पी अगर कोई मुझे दिखा दे ताकि सब्सिक्वेंट एडिशन में मैं उसको और डॉक्यूमेंट करूं।
जी अच्छा, अब आप ये बताइए एंड में, व्हाट इज द वन थिंग दैट हैज टू कम फ्रॉम विद इन द कम्युनिटी, बिकॉज कम्युनिटीज आल्सो हैव टू अडैप्ट एंड मॉडर्नाइज. वन ऑफ द कॉल्स दैट you've made is that polygamy is a useless thing to actually fight for, especially when its prevalence is not even something that is encouraged or embraced. And in any case, you know, if women today would ask for equality in that space. If the man has the right to multiple partners, so should the woman. तो वो एक अलग conversation हो जाती है. What are some of the things that Muslims from within the community need to be talking about that the community isn't talking about?
Education, and education. So, because that is the root of all development, and also about family planning. As I have said, that as the education goes up, the birth rate comes down. And since the educational standard of the Muslims is the least, so we have to work on that. And nobody is talking about it. If even the right wing is serious about Muslims practicing family planning, they should talk about their education. Have you heard anything except talking of madrasa and wanting even the madrasas closed? And have you heard anything about increasing the income of the population? They are the poorest. With poverty, the Bihar Hindus have high birth rate because they are poor. So poverty has to be addressed across all communities. Therefore, it is not a Muslim-Hindu question, and this is what I have argued. Actually, it is not Hindu versus Muslim. Hindus and Muslims are actually in the same boat because they have almost similar socio-economic conditions. And if the Muslim birth rate is the highest, which is the second highest birth rate? The Hindus. And if because of high birth rate, Muslims are very unpatriotic, who is the second most unpatriotic? The people who produce the second highest number of children. Therefore, they are actually on the same end of the spectrum. They are in the same boat, and we have to deal with it non-politically and fairly and neutrally.
And of course, you're being ironic about being patriotic and non-patriotic. But finally, the one reason that the country does not need population by legislation, managing population by legislation, what is that one reason?
Well, because people, you see farmers' agitation, because you will suddenly find people agitating. People don't want interference in their life so much. And now, if the government even enters their bedroom, I think that's a very, very undesirable thing to happen.
But what is wrong? What is wrong with the law itself, or the idea of a law itself?
Because I think the law is totally redundant. Number one, it will be repulsive. Secondly, it is not required, because as it is, as I said, the Indian population across communities are already bringing down their families. As I said, 24 states have reached less than replacement level. What can be a better success? Actually, Indian family planning is a success story. We should not look down upon it just because it is our country's policy. We are critical. We were the first to introduce a family planning policy in the world in 1952. And the fact that we came out of the denial mode early, the fact that we took the early initiative, and which is why the birth rate has come down very, very substantially, and we are very close to achieving the replacement rate. And let me also tell you, in the neighborhood Bangladesh, which was more backward than us, 10 times more backward, they have already achieved the replacement rate. Their birth rate is lower than in India.
Well, we leave it there. It's a very interesting book. It addresses one of, as I said, the most volatile conversations of our time, one of the most politicized, often communalized. But S.Y. Qureshi, congratulations on being so dispassionate and using only numbers. There's actually a mathematical model, as you said in this book, addressing that politically incorrect question: will India's Muslims ever overtake India's Hindus? And the answer is a resounding no. If you want to challenge Dr. Qureshi on that data with a mathematical model of your own, then please do read the book and read it for many other reasons as well. Thank you, Qureshi Saab, for joining us. Always a pleasure having you on the program. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you, Barkha.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.